December 17, 1944, Schoenberg, Belgium. The frozen ground trembled as Sergeant Curtis Adams of the 333 Field Artillery Battalion scribbled a final letter home to South Carolina, words that would never reach his family. They think we cannot fight. They believe their propaganda about inferior soldiers. Today, we will show them what black artillerymen can do. Through the winter fog, he had just witnessed the opening barrage of Germany's desperate gamble in the Ardennes. Artillery shells screamed overhead, German panzers rolled through snow-covered forests, and the Wehrmacht's final offensive in the west had begun. The 333, positioned near the German border, stood directly in the path of three entire German armies. Nazi ideology had taught Wehrmacht officers that black soldiers were subhuman, incapable of discipline, courage, or effective combat. Yet here, in the crucible of the Battle of the Bulge, this segregated African-American artillery battalion would lose half its men while delivering fire support, so devastating that German commanders would question everything they had been taught about race and combat effectiveness. The foundation had been laid on August 5, 1942, at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. The 333 Field Artillery Regiment activated as a segregated colored unit, as the United States Army officially classified it. 540 enlisted men and 30 officers formed a battalion equipped with the M1 155mm howitzer. Each gun weighed 12,000 pounds and could hurl a 95-pound shell over 14,000 yards. The battalion organized into 5 batteries: Able, Baker, Charlie, Service Battery, and Headquarters Battery. Each firing battery contained 4 howitzers. 11 soldiers operated each gun with precision that demanded intelligence, mathematical skill, and split-second coordination. Lieutenant Colonel Harmon Kelsey, a white officer from the regular army, commanded the battalion. Like most segregated units in World War II, white officers led black enlisted men. This structure reflected America's racial tensions, a nation fighting fascism abroad while practicing segregation at home. Yet the men of the 333 would prove that courage and competence knew no color. Training at Camp Gruber lasted through 1942 and into 1943. The camp sat 18 miles outside Muskogee, Oklahoma, 61 miles southeast of Tulsa. The location was no accident. The Deep South offered familiar segregation, familiar Jim Crow laws, familiar restrictions on African American life. The soldiers understood what they faced. Most came from southern states where discrimination was law. They had lived with inequality their entire lives. Now they would train to fight fascism while experiencing American racism. The training itself was rigorous and comprehensive. The soldiers learned artillery, mathematics, calculating trajectories that required understanding of physics, geometry, and meteorology. Each fire mission demanded rapid mental computation: distance to target, elevation angle, powder charge, wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, air pressure. Every variable affected where the shell landed. A single-degree error in elevation could miss the target by hundreds of yards. A miscalculation of wind drift could send shells into friendly positions. The mathematics were complex and unforgiving. The men mastered these complex calculations under time pressure. They learned to use slide rules and firing tables. They memorized ballistic coefficients and trajectory curves. They practiced mental arithmetic until they could calculate firing solutions in seconds. Their performance proved that intelligence and mathematical ability had nothing to do with race. Many of these soldiers had attended segregated schools with inadequate resources, yet they mastered artillery, science, as well as any white unit in the army. They practiced loading the massive shells. 95 pounds of high explosive, white phosphorus, or smoke. The projectile had to be loaded precisely, the powder charge inserted correctly, the breech closed properly. Any mistake could kill the entire crew. The loader had to lift the heavy shell from the ground, carry it to the breech, and ram it home in one smooth motion. The powder man had to select the correct charge from 7 available options, each producing different velocities and ranges. The breechman had to close and lock the mechanism, ensuring a perfect seal. The gunner had to set elevation and deflection with precision measured in mils, a unit so fine that 1 mil equals 1 yard of deviation at 1,000 yards distance. The men learned to work as teams, each soldier performing specific tasks in perfect sequence. Load, aim, fire, repeat. Speed and accuracy were everything. A well-trained crew could fire 3 rounds per minute. The 333's crews achieved this rate consistently. During training exercises, they often exceeded it. Their howitzers thundered across the Oklahoma plains, sending shells toward distant targets with devastating accuracy. Range officers documented their performance. The scores matched or exceeded those of white artillery battalions training at the same facility. They trained in displacing their heavy weapons. The 155mm howitzer weighed 12,000 pounds. The gun had to be hitched to a truck, moved to a new position, unhitched, leveled, aimed, and made ready to fire, all within minutes. In combat, artillery batteries had to displace rapidly to avoid counter-battery fire. German artillery observers would spot the muzzle flashes of American guns and call down fire on those positions. Survival depended on firing a mission and moving before German shells arrived. The 333 practiced this evolution until it became automatic. They could displace a 4-gun battery, move 3 miles, set up in new positions, and resume firing in under 30 minutes. This speed required coordination between dozens of men, multiple vehicles, and tons of equipment. It required each soldier to know not just his own job, but everyone else's job as well. If one man fell wounded, another had to take his place instantly. The battalion practiced until these movements became instinctive. They trained on communication procedures. Artillery depended on accurate information from forward observers positioned with the infantry. These observers, often miles from the guns, would spot targets and radio back coordinates. The Fire Direction Center would calculate firing solutions. The guns would shoot. The observer would watch where the shells landed and call corrections. Left 50 yards, add 200 yards. Fire for effect. This cycle repeated dozens of times in every engagement. Communication had to be clear, precise, and fast. The men learned radio procedure and field telephone operation. They practiced sending and receiving fire missions until they could do it perfectly under pressure. They memorized code words and authentication procedures. They learned to recognize voice patterns so they could identify who was calling even through heavy static. They practiced until communication became second nature. Camp Gruber itself reflected America's contradictions. The army demanded excellence from these men while denying them basic dignity. Segregated facilities, separate mess halls, different recreation areas, separate entrances to post buildings. White officers leading black enlisted men, the army maintained racial separation as strictly as any southern town, yet it expected these same segregated soldiers to perform at the highest levels. The men could not eat at the same tables as white soldiers. They could not use the same restrooms. They could not attend the same movie screenings at the base theater. When they went to nearby towns on leave, they faced Jim Crow laws that restricted where they could eat, sleep, or even walk. They were training to fight for American democracy while being denied the basic rights of American citizens. Yet the men of the 333 accepted the contradiction because they understood what was at stake. This was their chance to prove themselves in combat. This was their opportunity to demonstrate that black soldiers were the equals of white soldiers. They would not waste it. They trained harder than required. They practiced longer than ordered. They pushed themselves to achieve excellence because they knew they would be judged more harshly than white units. One mistake by a black unit would be used as evidence of racial inferiority. One failure would confirm prejudices. They could not afford to fail. In early 1943, the Army reorganized artillery units. The 333 Regiment broke apart. The 1st Battalion became the 333 Field Artillery Battalion. The 2nd Battalion became the 969 Field Artillery Battalion. Regimental headquarters transformed into the 333 Field Artillery Group, which would command multiple battalions. Both the 333 and 969 were African-American units with mostly white officers. They would serve as corps artillery, moving between divisions as needed, rather than being permanently attached to one infantry division. The 333 shipped to England in February 1944. On June 29, they landed at Utah Beach in Normandy. The war found them immediately. Within hours of landing, the battalion fired its first combat rounds, supporting the breakout from the beachhead. The guns were positioned in hedgerow country, the dense Norman bocage that limited visibility and channeled movement. Every field was a potential killing ground. Every hedgerow concealed German positions. The 333 provided fire support for the advancing infantry. Forward observers moved with the assault troops, calling back coordinates of German strongpoints. The howitzers responded with devastating accuracy. High explosive shells crashed into German positions, destroying bunkers and scattering defenders. The infantry advanced behind the artillery barrage, taking objectives that would have cost hundreds of casualties without fire support. Through July and August, they battled across Brittany. The fighting was continuous and brutal. German forces, cut off by the Allied breakout from Normandy, fought desperately to hold the Brittany ports. Every town became a battlefield. Every bridge was defended. Every crossroads was contested. The 333 fired thousands of rounds in support of the advancing infantry. At the Siege of Brest, their accurate fire demolished German fortifications that had withstood weeks of infantry assault. The Germans had converted the port city into a fortress. Concrete bunkers 6 feet, thick protected German positions. Interlocking fields of fire covered every approach. Minefields surrounded the perimeter. The defenders, garrison troops and naval personnel, numbered over 30,000 men. They had orders to hold to the last man. The city could not be taken by infantry alone. It required artillery, massive amounts of artillery, firing continuously day and night. The 333's howitzers provided the firepower that broke the defense. High explosive shells weighing 95 pounds smashed through reinforced concrete. Each shell contained 19 pounds of TNT. When it detonated inside a bunker, the explosion was devastating. Walls cracked. Roofs collapsed. Defenders were killed by blast and concussion. Direct hits collapsed bunkers entirely, burying everyone inside. Near misses shook the structures, stunning the defenders and making accurate return fire impossible. The battalion fired in carefully coordinated shoots. Forward observers identified targets. Fire direction centers calculated firing solutions. All 4 guns of a battery fired simultaneously, sending 4 shells toward the same target. The shells landed within seconds of each other, multiplying the destructive effect. Then the guns fired again and again. The continuous bombardment gave the defenders no respite, no chance to recover, no opportunity to repair damage. The precision of the fire impressed even hardened infantry veterans. Officers who had fought through North Africa and Sicily said they had never seen better artillery support. The shells landed exactly where needed. Targets were destroyed efficiently, without wasted ammunition. When infantry requested fire, the 333 responded within minutes. When infantry needed fire lifted because they were advancing, the guns stopped instantly. This level of coordination required skill, discipline, and constant communication. French civilians watched in amazement as Black American soldiers operated sophisticated artillery with deadly precision. Many had never seen African Americans before. Some had absorbed racist propaganda from both Vichy France and Nazi Germany. They expected ignorance and incompetence. They witnessed the opposite. The artillery crews worked with mechanical efficiency. Each man knew his job. Each task was performed smoothly. The guns fired with rhythmic precision. Load, aim, fire. Repeat. Hour after hour, day after day. Forward observers called coordinates in perfect military procedure. The radio transmissions were clear and professional. Target location. Type of target. Requested ammunition type. The Fire Direction Center acknowledged, calculated, and issued fire commands. The guns responded. Shells landed exactly where intended. Targets were destroyed with minimal wasted ammunition. This was not luck. This was professional soldiering of the highest order. The battalion's reputation grew with each engagement. Infantry commanders specifically requested the Rideau's Injo 333 for fire support missions. When a difficult target needed to be destroyed, they asked for the 333. When a critical attack required artillery support, they asked for the 333. Word spread through the divisions they supported. The Black Artillery Battalion was good. Very good. As good as any unit in the army. Division artillery officers praised their accuracy and responsiveness in official reports. After action, reports documented their effectiveness in technical military language that left no doubt about quality. One report from the 2nd Infantry Division stated that the 333 Field Artillery Battalion provided fire support of the highest order, with accuracy, speed, and professionalism that exceeded expectations. Another report noted that the battalion's forward observers demonstrated exceptional courage and skill, often operating far forward of friendly lines to direct fire onto German positions. These were not politically motivated assessments. These were combat evaluations written by professional officers who cared only about results. The 333 delivered results. Their fire was accurate. Their response was fast. Their coordination with infantry was seamless. They performed their mission with excellence. Combat records documented their effectiveness. The battalion once fired 1,500 rounds in a 24-hour period, maintaining such a sustained rate of fire that gun barrels glowed red-hot. They captured the French village of Saint-Georges through direct fire, an unusual accomplishment for artillery. Their forward observers called in fire missions with such accuracy that infantry commanders specifically requested the 333 for support. In October 1944, after months of continuous combat, the 333 received orders to a quiet sector. The Ardennes region along the Belgian-German border had seen minimal activity. The High Command considered it unsuitable for major offensive operations due to difficult terrain. The untested 106 Infantry Division would hold the line. The 333 Field Artillery Group, including the 333 and 969 battalions, would provide fire support. The battalion moved to positions around the small village of Schoenberg near Saint-Vith, Belgium. Service battery positioned west of the Our River. Batteries Abel, Baker and Charlie deployed east of the river, 11 miles behind the front lines. The atmosphere was tranquil to a point almost approaching garrison conditions, as a later army report would describe it. The men built comfortable positions. Log cabins and well-insulated tents replaced foxholes. A recreation centre opened with a beer hall, bowling alley, and even a badminton court. The 333 prepared a musical theatre performance for Christmas. Regular leave to Paris and Belgian cities became routine. After months of combat, the soldiers enjoyed relative peace. They did not know they stood at ground zero for Germany's last great offensive in the West. Master Sergeant Floyd Jones of the 333 remembered those final peaceful days in a post-war interview. "We had excellent morale. The men were rested, well-fed, properly equipped. Our guns were in perfect condition. We had ammunition stockpiled. Everything was ready. We just thought we would spend a quiet winter before the spring offensive." Then December 16 arrived, and everything changed. 0530 hours, December 16, 1944. German artillery erupted across the entire Ardennes front. Shells screamed into American positions from hundreds of concealed guns. The bombardment lasted 90 minutes. Then came silence, more terrifying than the explosions. Through the winter fog emerged the shape of German armour, panzers and assault guns rolling forward in massive columns. 3 German armies, 28 divisions, 250,000 men launched Operation Wacht am Rhein. Adolf Hitler's desperate gamble to split the Allied armies, recapture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The 106 Infantry Division, in position less than 2 weeks, found itself attacked by overwhelming force. 2 of its 3 regiments were quickly surrounded. The division held a front of 26 miles, when Army doctrine stated a single division could hold no more than 5 miles. The line shattered. German forces poured through gaps, racing west toward the road hub of Bastion. The 333 Field Artillery Battalion received word of the breakthrough at 0800 hours. Master Sergeant Jones recalled the moment. "We had just been sitting around awaiting orders when news came of the German breakthrough, so get ready for action." The peaceful sector had become the hinge of Germany's entire offensive. The battalion's forward observers in the village of Blyalf began calling for fire support almost immediately. Battery Charlie, commanded by Captain William MacLeod, responded within minutes. The howitzers roared, sending 95-pound high-explosive shells arcing toward German positions. The fire was accurate and devastating. Germans who expected to take Blyalf by noon instead found themselves pinned down by precisely targeted artillery. Battery Charlie's guns fired continuously throughout the morning, helping to slow the German advance. But the situation deteriorated rapidly. The 106 Division's artillery commander, General McMahon, ordered the 333 and 969 battalions to begin withdrawing west. However, he desperately requested that several batteries remain in position to provide covering fire, assuring them the main lines would hold and they would be in no danger. He was catastrophically wrong. Batteries Abel and Baker of the 333 received orders to displace west toward Bastogne. They began moving their howitzers, trucks, and equipment through snow-covered roads. Battery Charlie and Service Battery received different orders. Stay in position. Continue providing fire support. Cover the withdrawal of the 106 Division. The men of these batteries knew the danger. They stayed anyway. Throughout December 16, Battery Charlie fired mission after mission. German infantry assaulted American positions. American forward observers called for fire. The 333's guns answered every call. The howitzers fired so many rounds that ammunition began running low. Still, they continued. As darkness fell, the situation became critical. German forces had broken through on both flanks. Battery Charlie and Service Battery were now behind enemy lines, still firing in support of isolated American units. By the morning of December 17, Germans controlled Schönberg and the bridge across the Our River to St. Vith. Service Battery attempted to withdraw through the village. German armor and infantry ambushed them with overwhelming firepower. Many men died in the first minutes. Those who survived were captured. During the confusion of being herded to the rear, an American aircraft attacked the German column, causing more casualties among both captors and prisoners. Battery Charlie faced similar catastrophe. German forces overran their positions. Some artillerymen grabbed rifles and fought as infantry. Others tried to destroy their howitzers to prevent capture. The battery commander, Captain William MacLeod, fought alongside his men until killed in action. Technical Sergeant William Pritchett organized a defense that allowed some soldiers to escape. He died covering their withdrawal. Private First Class George Davis manned a machine gun until German fire cut him down. By the end of December 17, the 333 Field Artillery Battalion had been shattered. 6 officers, including Lieutenant Colonel Kelsey, and 222 enlisted men, were dead or captured. 9 howitzers, 34 trucks, and 12 weapons carriers were lost. The battalion suffered more casualties during the initial German assault than any other artillery unit in the 8th Corps. Of approximately 540 men, only 286 remained. The 333 had lost more than half its strength in 2 days of fighting. But 11 men from Battery Charlie and Service Battery escaped the German net. Technical 4th Grade Curtis Adams of South Carolina, Private First Class Major Bradley of Mississippi, Private First Class George Davis Jr. of Alabama, Staff Sergeant Thomas Forte of Mississippi, Private First Class Robert Green of Georgia, Private First Class James Leatherwood of Mississippi, Private First Class Nathaniel Moss of Texas, Private First Class George Moten of Texas, Technical 4th Grade William Pritchett of Alabama, Private First Class James Stewart of West Virginia, and Private First Class Dew Turner of Arkansas. These 11 soldiers walked 10 miles through deep snow and record cold, trying to reach American lines. At approximately 1500 hours on December 17, exhausted and freezing, they approached the first house in the tiny hamlet of Wereth, Belgium. The home belonged to Matthias Langer, a Belgian farmer. Inside were Matthias, his wife Maria, their 12-year-old son Herman, and a family friend. The 11 soldiers knocked on the door. They were cold, hungry, and desperate. They carried only 2 rifles between them. The Langer family welcomed them inside. Maria prepared food. The soldiers ate, rested, and warmed themselves by the fire. Herman Langer, the boy, would remember those soldiers seated at his family's kitchen table for the rest of his life. But this area of Belgium was complicated. It had been part of Germany until the Treaty of Versailles transferred it to Belgium after World War I. Many residents still identified as German. Some welcomed the Wehrmacht's return. A neighbor, someone who supported Germany, saw the American soldiers. That neighbor informed a German patrol. The patrol belonged to the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, the most fanatical Nazi formation in the German military. The SS patrol arrived at the Langer home. The 11 American soldiers had no choice but to surrender. They walked out peacefully, hands raised, obeying the laws of war. The Germans marched them down the road toward a large, snow-covered field. There, away from witnesses, the SS soldiers revealed the true face of Nazi ideology. They beat the prisoners with rifle butts and boots. They broke legs with kicks and blows. They cut off fingers. They stabbed men with bayonets in the eyes and head. They shot soldiers who tried to bandage their comrades' wounds. They tortured 11 helpless men because those men were black, because Nazi racial theory classified them as subhuman, because the Wehrmacht had been taught that African Americans were less than animals. When Allied forces recaptured the area 2 months later, they found the bodies frozen in the snow. The evidence of torture was undeniable: broken bones, bayonet wounds, mutilations. The United States Army investigated. Investigators documented everything. They interviewed the Langer family and other witnesses. They photographed the scene. They identified each victim. But remarkably, they did nothing more. Unlike the Malmedy massacre of white American prisoners, which resulted in extensive war crimes prosecutions, the Wereth massacre led to no charges, no trials, no justice. The 11 men of the 333 Field Artillery Battalion were murdered, investigated, and then forgotten. While 11 men died at Wereth, the survivors of the 333 fought on. Batteries Abel and Baker had successfully withdrawn toward Bastion. They arrived in the critical road hub just as German forces began encircling the city. The remnants of the 333 joined with the 969 Field Artillery Battalion, their sister unit which had remained intact. Together, these African-American artillerymen would help write one of the most famous defensive stands in American military history. Bastogne sat at the junction of 7 major roads through the Ardennes Mountains. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled movement through the region. German commanders needed the city desperately. American commanders understood they must hold it at all costs. Major General Troy Middleton, 8th Corps commander, ordered the 101 Airborne Division to Bastogne. The paratroopers arrived by truck on December 18 and 19. They had no artillery. They had minimal supplies. They needed fire support urgently. The 333 and 969 provided it. The remnants of the 333, now reduced to approximately 140 men and 5 howitzers, integrated into the 969's command structure. They positioned their guns in a defensive arc around Bastogne. Forward observers moved forward with the infantry. Communication lines were established. Ammunition was stockpiled. The exhausted survivors of the initial German assault prepared to fight again. This time they would have company. The paratroopers of the 101 tank destroyer battalions, engineer units, and a handful of tanks formed a composite defense force. But artillery would be the decisive weapon. On December 20, German forces completed the encirclement of Bastogne. The garrison was surrounded, cut off from supply, and facing multiple German divisions. The defenders numbered approximately 18,000 men. The attackers numbered over 45,000. The Germans sent an ultimatum demanding surrender. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101, sent back his famous one-word reply: nuts. The battle for Bastion had begun in earnest. The situation was desperate by any measure. Ammunition was rationed to 10 artillery rounds per gun per day. Medical supplies ran low. Food stocks diminished. The weather prevented air resupply. Fog and snow grounded Allied aircraft, giving the Germans freedom to attack without fear of airstrikes. The defenders were on their own. The men of the 333 and 969 understood their situation perfectly. They were black soldiers fighting for a nation that segregated them. They were facing Wehrmacht and SS formations indoctrinated with Nazi racial ideology that considered them subhuman. They knew that if they surrendered or were captured, they faced probable execution. December 21 through 23. German forces launched multiple assaults on Bastogne's perimeter. The attacks followed a pattern. German artillery would bombard American positions for 30 minutes to an hour. Then the bombardment would lift. Infantry and armor would attack, trying to break through while the defenders were still stunned from the shelling. The tactics were standard Wehrmacht doctrine, proven effective on battlefields from Poland to France to Russia. But Bastogne was different. The defenders had artillery, good artillery, black artillery. Each attack began with artillery preparation, followed by infantry and armor attacks. The defenders called for counter-battery fire. The 333 and 969 responded instantly. Their forward observers, positioned in the frozen trenches with the paratroopers, watched the German preparations through field glasses. They identified assembly areas where German troops gathered before attacks. They spotted artillery positions that revealed themselves through muzzle flashes. They called back coordinates. The fire direction centers, working in cellars and basements in Bastogne, received the coordinates. Officers and sergeants hunched over maps and firing tables, calculating solutions by candlelight. The mathematics had to be perfect. One error could land shells on friendly positions. The calculations took 2 to 3 minutes. Then the firing commands went out to the gun positions. At the gun positions, crews waited in frozen pits. The temperature hovered around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow covered everything. The men wore every piece of clothing they owned, but still the cold penetrated. Their hands were numb. Their feet ached. Exhaustion dulled their movements. Yet when the fire command arrived, they moved with practiced precision. Their forward observers directed fire with deadly accuracy. High explosive shells tore through German formations. The shells weighed 95 pounds and travelled at over 1,500 feet per second. When they hit, the explosion was devastating. A direct hit on a truck vaporized the vehicle and everyone in it. A near miss flipped trucks over and shredded tires. A shell landing among infantry killed or wounded everyone within 30 yards. Time-delayed fuses allowed shells to penetrate buildings before exploding, clearing German positions. The fuse was set to delay detonation for a fraction of a second after impact. The shell would crash through a wall or roof, penetrate into the building, then explode. The confined space magnified the blast. Walls blew out. Roofs collapsed. No one inside survived. This technique was particularly effective against German troops sheltering in stone buildings in the villages around Bastogne. White phosphorus rounds created smoke screens and ignited vehicles. White phosphorus burned at over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It could not be extinguished with water. It stuck to skin and burned through flesh to bone. German soldiers hit with white phosphorus often died in agony. Even hardened infantry feared white phosphorus more than high explosive. The psychological effect was enormous. German troops learned to scatter and run when white phosphorus shells landed. This disrupted attacks and broke unit cohesion. The African-American artillery crews worked with mechanical precision despite exhaustion, cold, and dwindling supplies. They had been fighting almost without rest since December 20. Sleep came in brief intervals between fire missions. Food was cold rations eaten while manning the guns. There was never enough ammunition. The rationing meant every shell had to count. They could not afford to waste rounds on unconfirmed targets or speculative fire. The physical demands were extraordinary. Each 95-pound shell had to be lifted from its storage position, carried to the gun, and loaded into the breech. After firing hundreds of rounds, the loaders' backs and shoulders screamed with pain. Their hands were torn and bleeding from handling the rough metal casings. Yet they continued. Load. Fire. Load. Fire. Hour after hour. The howitzers themselves suffered from the continuous firing. Gun barrels became fouled with powder residue after every few dozen shots. The crews had to swab out the barrels with wet rags between fire missions. The breech mechanisms grew stiff in the cold and had to be lubricated constantly. Recoil systems leaked hydraulic fluid and had to be topped off. The guns were breaking down from overuse, but there were no spare parts, no mechanics, no time for proper maintenance. The crews kept them firing through ingenuity and determination. The fighting became so close that the 155mm howitzers engaged in direct fire. Artillery pieces designed to shoot at targets miles away were being aimed like rifles at German tanks and infantry just hundreds of yards distant. This was the ultimate test of crew discipline and courage. Artillerymen were trained to fight from protected positions far behind the front lines. Now they found themselves in direct combat, aiming their massive weapons at targets they could see with the naked eye. Direct fire with a howitzer was dangerous and difficult. The gun had to be leveled horizontally, pointing at the target like a rifle. The crew had to expose themselves to aim the weapon. There were no optical sights designed for direct fire. The gunner had to look down the barrel and estimate the lay of the gun. The range was determined by eye, not by mathematical calculation. The powder charge had to be selected based on judgment, not firing tables. Everything that made artillery an exact science became rough approximation. German machine gun fire raked their positions. The crews could hear bullets cracking overhead, snapping past their heads, clanging off the gun shields. Mortar rounds exploded nearby, throwing up frozen earth and metal fragments. German snipers aimed at anyone who showed themselves. The crews had to work while under fire, moving quickly, staying low, praying they would not be hit. Still, the crews serviced their guns, loading, aiming, firing with steady hands and calm precision. When a German tank appeared 300 yards away, the crew loaded high explosive with a super-quick fuse. The shell left the barrel with a tremendous roar. It covered the distance in less than a second. The impact was catastrophic. The shell punched through the tank's thin side armor and exploded inside. The tank brewed up instantly, flames shooting from every hatch. The crew never had a chance to escape. When German infantry attacked across open ground, the crews loaded shells with variable time fuses, set to detonate in the air above the attackers. These airbursts rained shrapnel down on men who thought they were safe in foxholes and trenches. The killing radius of an airburst was enormous, 50 yards or more. A single, well-placed airburst could wipe out an entire platoon. The German attacks broke apart under this fire, survivors running back to their own lines. One gun crew found themselves facing German infantry at less than 100 yards. The loader grabbed a shell, rammed it home, and stepped aside. The gunner traversed the gun left, following the running Germans. The assistant gunner closed the breech. The gunner yanked the lanyard. The howitzer fired. The shell covered the distance almost instantly. The explosion threw German bodies through the air like rag dolls. The crew loaded again, fired again, kept firing until no Germans remained standing. This direct fire combat exemplified the 333's experience throughout the siege. They were artillerymen forced to fight as frontline infantry while still performing their primary mission of providing fire support. The crews alternated between firing their howitzers and defending their positions with rifles and machine guns. When German infantry tried to overrun the gun positions, The artillerymen fought them off with small arms fire, then returned to their howitzers to resume firing support missions. The mental and physical demands were extraordinary. Calculate firing solutions under pressure, service the guns despite exhaustion, defend the positions against direct attack. Do all of this while cold, hungry, and low on ammunition. The temperature never rose above freezing. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes. Men urinated on their hands to warm them enough to work. They slept in shifts, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, never long enough to truly rest. They ate whatever food could be scrounged, often just crackers and cold beans. Coffee was made from melted snow and grounds that had already been used twice. The ammunition shortage became critical. Batteries were rationed to 10 rounds per gun per day. This meant each shot had to count. Forward observers became more selective, calling fire only on the most important targets. Battery commanders became more cautious, refusing to shoot at targets that could be engaged by infantry or tanks. Every shell was precious, every shell was needed. They could not waste a single round. Yet despite these impossible conditions, the crews never failed. They never broke. They maintained combat effectiveness under conditions that would have shattered lesser units. When infantry called for fire, the 333 and 969 answered. When tanks needed support, the artillery was there. When German attacks threatened to break through, artillery fire stopped them. The black artillerymen held their ground and did their job with a professionalism that earned respect from everyone who witnessed it. German after-action reports, captured and translated after the war, expressed shock at the quality of American artillery fire around Bastion. These documents, discovered in German military archives in the 1950s and 60s, provided remarkable insight into Wehrmacht perceptions. The reports were written by professional officers trained in the Prussian military tradition. They were accustomed to precise observation and factual reporting. What they reported about American artillery contradicted everything Nazi ideology had taught them. One Wehrmacht regimental commander wrote in his diary, discovered decades later in German archives. The American artillery fire is devastating in its accuracy. Our attacks are broken up before they reach the main line. We cannot advance. We cannot identify the American batteries to suppress them. The fire is professional, disciplined, and unceasing. These cannot be the inferior Negro troops our propaganda described. This passage is remarkable for several reasons. First, it acknowledges American artillery superiority in unambiguous terms. Second, it explicitly mentions race, something rare in German military documents. Third, it directly contradicts Nazi propaganda. This was an officer trained to believe in Aryan supremacy, forced by combat experience to question that belief. The evidence of his own eyes and the casualties in his regiment made denial impossible. A divisional report from the 26th Volksgrenadier Division complained, "Artillery fire from the Bastogne perimeter is the heaviest and most accurate we have encountered. Our casualties from artillery exceed our casualties from all other causes combined. Every attack is met with immediate and precisely targeted fire. The American artillery is of the highest quality. This report is significant because it quantifies the impact. Artillery casualties exceeded all other causes combined. This meant more men were killed by artillery than by rifles, machine guns, mortars, and tanks together." The report also notes that the fire was immediate and precisely targeted. This indicated good forward observers, efficient fire direction centers, and skilled gun crews. The final sentence is unqualified praise. The American artillery is of the highest quality. No caveats. No excuses. Just acknowledgement of superior performance. Another German report, from a battalion commander in the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, stated, "We attempted to attack at dawn. American artillery fire fell on our assembly area before we could advance. The fire was concentrated and accurate. We suffered 30% casualties before the attack began. The attack was cancelled. Our men are demoralized by the constant artillery fire. They say the Americans can see everything and hit anything. This report reveals the psychological impact of effective artillery. German soldiers became demoralized. They felt exposed and vulnerable. They believed the Americans could see everything and hit anything. This was not true, but it felt true to men enduring continuous bombardment. The fear of artillery became paralyzing. Men hesitated to move. They stayed in cover. They became reluctant to attack. This fear was more damaging than the physical casualties. Wehrmacht officers, raised on Nazi ideology that taught black soldiers were subhuman and incapable of military excellence, found their theories destroyed by reality. The 333 and 969 were not inferior. They were among the best artillery units on the battlefield. Their fire broke German attacks. Their accuracy destroyed German equipment. Their discipline never wavered even under the most desperate circumstances. The transformation of German perceptions was forced, not voluntary. These officers did not change their beliefs because they wanted to. They changed because reality gave them no choice. When propaganda meets truth in combat, propaganda loses. When racial theories encounter competent soldiers of the supposedly inferior race, the theories collapse. Some German officers never admitted this publicly. They maintained their racist beliefs despite the evidence. But others acknowledged the truth in private writings discovered after the war. They recognized that they had been taught lies. They understood that race had nothing to do with military competence. Combat forced this recognition. Men who could deliver accurate artillery fire under impossible conditions were not inferior by any rational standard. The irony was bitter. Nazi Germany, which claimed racial superiority as justification for conquest, found itself defeated partly by soldiers it classified as subhuman. The Wehrmacht, which prided itself on tactical excellence, was beaten by units it had been taught to despise. The contradiction was inescapable. Either the Nazi racial theories were wrong, or the evidence of combat was wrong. No rational person could deny the evidence of combat. December 24, Christmas Eve. The weather cleared briefly. German aircraft bombed Bastion, killing Captain Ray Chappell of Battery Baker 333. The garrison suffered heavy casualties. Then the clouds lifted further. Allied aircraft finally reached Bastion. Transport planes dropped supplies. Fighter bombers attacked German positions. The siege continued, but hope arrived with those supply drops. The defenders knew relief was coming. They just had to hold a little longer. December 25, Christmas Day. A strange quiet settled over the battlefield. Both sides paused, exhausted. The men of the 3 and 969 ate cold rations in frozen gun pits. They were far from home, fighting for a country that denied them equality, surrounded by enemies who wanted them dead because of their race. Yet they never broke, they never surrendered, they never stopped fighting. Private First Class Samuel Ellis of the 969 wrote in a letter that reached his family months later, "Today is Christmas. We are surrounded. We have little food, little ammunition, and no way out. But we are not afraid. We will hold this ground. We will do our duty. Tell everyone back home that when it mattered most, the black artillerymen stood and fought. Let them remember that." December 26. General George Patton's Third Army broke through the German encirclement from the south. The 4th Armoured Division's tanks reached Bastion's perimeter. The siege was lifted. The defenders had held. Bastion remained in American hands. The German offensive had failed. Over the following weeks, American forces pushed the Wehrmacht back toward Germany. The Battle of the Bulge was won. For their actions at Bastion, both the 333 and 969 Field Artillery Battalions received recognition as part of the Presidential Unit Citation awarded to units attached to the 101 Airborne Division on March 13, 1945. This was the first Presidential Unit Citation, the United States Army's highest unit award, given for actions that included African American combat units in World War II. The citation recognized extraordinary heroism in action against an armed enemy. The statistics told a grim story. The 333 Field Artillery Battalion entered the Battle of the Bulge with approximately 540 officers and men. By battle's end, 6 officers, including the battalion commander, and 222 enlisted men were casualties or prisoners of war. The casualty rate exceeded 42%. The battalion suffered more casualties than any other artillery unit in the 8th Corps. Yet despite these devastating losses, the survivors never broke. They fought effectively until relieved. They maintained discipline, accuracy, and combat effectiveness under conditions that would have destroyed lesser units. The combat record proved beyond doubt that African American soldiers were the equals of any troops in the United States Army. The 333's accuracy, discipline, and courage matched or exceeded white artillery battalions. Wehrmacht officers who survived the war and were interviewed by American historians consistently acknowledged the high quality of American artillery, making no racial distinctions. One former German artillery officer stated in a 1952 interview, "The American artillery around Bastion was superb. The forward observers were excellent. The fire was accurate and devastating. The crews serviced their weapons with speed and precision. These were highly trained, highly seasoned, motivated, highly effective soldiers." After Bastion, the remnants of the 333 returned to limited duties. The battalion was scheduled for disbandment due to heavy losses and the difficulty of obtaining replacement soldiers for a segregated unit. For months, the skeleton crew performed guard duties and labor tasks. Finally, in April 1945, sufficient replacements arrived. The 333 Field Artillery Battalion reconstituted and returned to combat for the final weeks of the war in Europe. The 333 Field Artillery Group, the headquarters element, served through the Rhineland and Central Europe campaigns until Germany's surrender. The unit was inactivated on December 30, 1945, at Camp Patrick Henry, Virginia. The 333 Field Artillery Battalion was disbanded on June 10, 1945, in Germany. The men returned home to a nation, still practicing segregation, still enforcing Jim Crow laws, still denying them the rights they had fought to preserve for others. The Wereth 11 received no recognition. The massacre was investigated but never prosecuted. While the Malmedy massacre led to extensive war crimes, trials, and convictions, the murder of 11 black soldiers led nowhere. A 1949 Senate Armed Services Committee report documented 12 incidents of Nazi troops massacring captured American soldiers and Belgian civilians during the Battle of the Bulge. The Wereth massacre was not included. For decades, the story remained buried. African American veterans returned home to face the same discrimination they had known before the war. The sacrifices of black soldiers in World War II faded from public memory, overshadowed by the larger narrative of American triumph. But in 1994, 50 years after the massacre, Herman Langer, the boy who had watched 11 soldiers eat at his family's table, erected a memorial at Wereth. Langer, now an elderly man, had never forgotten. The simple stone cross bore the names of the 11 murdered men. It stood in the field where they died, a private act of remembrance in a tiny hamlet unmarked on most maps. Then in 2001, 3 Belgian citizens embarked on a mission to create a proper memorial to the Wereth 11 and to all African American soldiers who fought in World War II. They raised funds, purchased land, and built a fitting monument. The memorial was dedicated in 2004, 60 years after the massacre. Road signs were erected pointing to Wereth. The Belgian Tourist Bureau included the memorial in Battle of the Bulge guidebooks. The story finally began reaching wider audiences. In 2006, the Worcester, Massachusetts chapter of Veterans of the Battle of the Bulge dedicated the first memorial to the Wereth 11 on United States soil at the Winchendon Veterans Memorial Cemetery on August 20. In 2016, another memorial was erected in Miller Park, Bloomington, Illinois, naming each soldier. Finally, on September 19, 2016, the Senate passed Resolution 571, officially recognizing the dedicated service and ultimate sacrifice of the 11 African American soldiers massacred at Wereth. In 2017, United States Representatives David McKinley and Bobby Rush introduced House Concurrent Resolution 4-3 in Congress, providing official recognition of the massacre. Justice had come, 72 years late, but it had come. The men were finally acknowledged. Their sacrifice was finally recognized. The 333 Field Artillery Battalion's lineage continued in the post-war army. On November 27, 1946, the battalion was reconstituted in the Organized Reserve and redesignated as the 446 Field Artillery Battalion, activated on February 15, 1947, at Birmingham, Alabama. On July 1, 1959, the 333 Field Artillery Group was reactivated as the 333 Artillery Regiment, with the 446 and 969 Field Artillery Battalions subordinated to it. On September 1, 1971, the regiment was retitled the 333 Field Artillery Regiment. Elements of the 333 served in Operation Desert Storm in 1991. The regiment's coat of arms commemorates its World War II service. A lion from the arms of Belgium bears the red and blue shield from the arms of Bastion, honouring the Distinguished Unit Citation for Bastion. The white border represents the encirclement of the city and the snow-covered terrain of the Battle of the Bulge. A swordbreaker, a medieval weapon with barbs that admitted a sword but prevented withdrawal, represents breaking enemy military power. The 5 barbs stand for the unit's participation in 5 European campaigns in World War II. The lesson learned at such terrible cost eventually helped transform the United States military. President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 998, on July 26, 1948, desegregating the armed forces. The order stated that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed services without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. The process took years to complete, but the change was irreversible. The 333 and other African American combat units had proven that segregation was not only morally wrong, but militarily foolish. Master Sergeant Floyd Jones, interviewed in 1983, spoke for many veterans. We knew we were fighting 2 enemies, the Germans and racism at home. We won the first war in 1945. The second war took longer, but we won that too. We proved that black soldiers were the equals of any soldiers in the world. Nobody could deny that after Bastogne. We held that ground. We fought when everyone doubted we would. We proved ourselves when it mattered most. In 2020, during the pandemic, the United States Embassy in Belgium continued holding ceremonies at the Wereth Memorial. Even with restrictions and challenges, diplomats and local officials gathered each December to honor the 11 murdered men. The commitment to remembrance had become part of the diplomatic relationship between America and Belgium. The Wereth Memorial stands today in that small Belgian field, marking where 11 men died because Nazi ideology classified them as subhuman. Visitors from around the world come to pay respects. The names are carved in stone. Curtis Adams, Major Bradley, George Davis Jr., Thomas Forte, Robert Greene, James Leatherwood, Nathaniel Moss, George Moten, William Pritchett, James Stewart, Dew Turner. 11 men who knocked on a door seeking shelter and received death instead. The 333 Field Artillery Battalion entered the Battle of the Bulge on December 16, 1944, positioned near Schoenberg, Belgium. Within 48 hours, the battalion lost half its strength. 11 men were massacred at Wereth. 6 officers and 222 enlisted men became casualties or prisoners. Yet the survivors regrouped, joined the defense of Bastogne, and helped deliver the artillery fire that broke German attacks and preserved the vital road hub. They fought with skill and courage that earned the Presidential Unit Citation. They proved beyond doubt that African American soldiers were the equals of any troops in the world. Their story remained largely forgotten for decades. Justice came late but finally arrived. The Wereth 11 were recognized. The 333's combat record was acknowledged. Today, historians, museums, and memorials preserve their legacy. The story of the 333 Field Artillery Battalion is a story of courage tested in the most extreme circumstances and proven genuine. It is a story of men who served a nation that denied them equality, yet they served with distinction and honor. And it is a story that must be remembered, because these men earned nothing less through their service at Bastion and their sacrifice at Wereth. The German officers who doubted black artillerymen learned the truth in December 1944. The 333 and 969 Field Artillery Battalions delivered fire support as effective as any units in the American Army. The men who were dismissed as inferior proved themselves under pressure. They held Bastion. They broke German attacks. They earned the highest honors. Their sacrifice revealed the truth that courage knows no color.